This is part 2 of a 3-part series. We invited all of the Norfolk County District Attorney candidates to be interviewed. You will hear from the 6 that responded and were available. This episode also includes references to domestic violence and suicide. Please do take care while you listen. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Liz Speaks podcast. My name is Liz Speakman, and I'm so happy to be here with you all today. The purpose of this podcast is to provide information about local issues, share some of my take on what's happening, and to have guests. So each of our episodes, there'll be some kind of opportunity for civic engagement. The idea is to provide information so that you know what's happening and then can figure out where you want to plug in and how you can be active in our community. So I'm really excited for our guest today. We have Adam Deitch, who's running for the Norfolk County District Attorney seat. Welcome, Adam.
Liz, great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So we'll start off, we'll dive right in. Tell me a little bit about why you decided to run for the District Attorney.
Sure. I had a feeling you would ask that question. I'm running because I think Norfolk County deserves better. Until this past November, I was a federal prosecutor at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boston. And I started out there doing all kinds of cases, everything from gun and drug cases to bank robberies to child exploitation. But I ended up mostly doing public corruption cases across Massachusetts, including and especially right here in Norfolk County. And it got to a point over the last few years where I was looking at the drumbeat of cases here, and I literally said out loud, what on earth is going on in Norfolk County? And so I left the U.S. Attorney's Office in November and launched this campaign because I believe what our DA's office needs is wholesale, systemic, cultural change, the kind of change that can only come from a change in leadership and ideally an outside perspective.
Thank you. So tell me, what do you think is working well in the Norfolk County DA's office, and what do you think needs improvement?
Yeah, I think, I'll get to the second part and spend more time on what needs improvement. I think there are things that the DA's office does really well, and I think most of all, what's clear is that there are a lot of people at the DA's office who are there for the right reasons, who are working hard and care about public service. And so I'm not a candidate, despite being a change candidate, despite believing that we need real change in the office. I'm not someone who wants to burn down the office or fire everyone or anything like that. But I do think that the next DA is going to have to be firm and decisive and thoughtful, evaluate what works and embrace those things, but also have the courage to stand up and say, these are the things that aren't working, these are the things that need to change. And I think the biggest thing in the second part is that people in Norfolk County have lost faith and confidence in the DA's office. There have been 2 huge cases that have generated a ton of publicity, and they both have identified a common theme. Under the current district attorney, there has been a 2-tiered system of justice. People are not treated equally. People are not treated fairly. Over the last 16 years, if you know the right people or if you're connected to law enforcement, you've gotten special treatment. And that's the number one thing that needs to change.
And how do you propose making that happen?
So I think there are a lot of things. I think leadership style, prosecutorial philosophy, but also a comprehensive policy agenda. I was the first candidate in this race to launch one. It's called the Accountability Agenda, and it is a 10-point plan that's growing by the day of key changes that we can make. Everything from establishing a first-of-its-kind anti-corruption task force, where not only are we actually doing corruption cases in Norfolk County, but we're sending a message to the public that corruption will not be tolerated here, to establishing a real conviction integrity unit to both evaluate cases where there might be questions and also to prevent potential wrongful convictions, to establishing a cold case unit where we have dedicated prosecutors and investigators getting justice for victims who've been waiting for it for too long. And I think another aspect of all of it is how the office communicates to the public. The office should be open and transparent and accountable, of course, and there are ways it can be done. There's a concept called data-driven prosecution, which is a key tenet of the accountability agenda, and it is what it sounds like. It is the collection and marshaling of data, both to evaluate progress over time and see how you're doing in working toward achieving real goals, but it's also a great tool to communicate with the public. Here's what's happening, here's the progress we're making, and publishing that data on a website that doesn't look like it was built on an Apple II computer in 1997. I think there's a lot that we can do. And then last, and there's plenty more, website is voteadamdeitch.com, but eliminating politics from the work of the office. Politics should stop at the door of the DA's office. I happen to be a lifelong Democrat. I'm running in a partisan race as a Democrat, but politics should have absolutely nothing to do with what goes on at the DA's office.
So I think there's, for me, I've worked in the field of domestic violence and sexual assault for a long time, and so in my work I've had a lot of interactions with assistant district attorneys, with victim advocates, and seen the way that the DA's office has a really critical role in determining whether a crime is prosecuted, to what extent, if there's sort of deals made. But I think the average person may not totally know a lot about the role of the district attorney and in sort of the actual power that that role has in determining people's pathway into a criminal legal system or somewhere else. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. Since I launched the campaign, I've had literally thousands of conversations with citizens across Norfolk County, and the reality is most people don't know who their DA is, and don't know what the DA does. It's a down ballot race, but I actually believe it's the single most important elected position in a community. Because the DA wields such significant power. I think in a criminal case, the most significant moment is actually the day a prosecutor decides whether to charge and what to charge. More so even than, all due respect to the judges on the bench, but that dictates what the parameters are on the back end for sentences. And I think, it almost doesn't matter whether a person knows who their DA is. It doesn't matter if somebody needs the DA's office. It doesn't matter that Adam Deitch is the DA. What matters, though, because it's usually the worst day of somebody's life, when you need somebody at the DA's office, either you or a family member has been the victim of a crime, or you or a family member has been arrested for a crime, and then you just want to know that the people you're dealing with are competent and trustworthy and professional and are going to treat everyone fairly and equally.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, I've certainly worked with a lot of survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence who have had really thoughtful and compassionate interactions with the DA's office, and that has made such a difference in their healing because the criminal legal system is incredibly challenging to navigate, very intimidating, and so I think when survivors know they have someone that they can ask questions to, that they can sort of share what's happening for them and get some support, it makes such a difference.
Yeah, I completely agree. And accountability to survivors and victims and their families is a key part of why I'm running. I kind of put accountability into 3 buckets. One is we're going to hold criminals accountable. Public safety is the #1 job of a DA's office. We're going to be accountable to the public in ways that I already talked about. But maybe most importantly, or at least as importantly, we want to hold ourselves accountable and be accountable to survivors and victims and their family members. One of the shining examples of this DA's office's complete dysfunction over the past few years is the Sandra Birchmore case, where a young woman was found dead in her apartment in Canton, and this DA's office ruled her death a suicide. And they didn't look at all the evidence, they didn't complete a real investigation. The U.S. Attorney's Office had to step in and do an actual investigation, take the basic investigative steps. You and I are not trained investigators unless there's something about you I don't know.
No.
But if we had shown up to that crime scene, there are basic investigative steps that you and I would have taken that this DA's office and the state police detective unit there never did, and it's completely unacceptable. We should not in Norfolk County be waiting for the feds to come in to actually, get justice for victims. And Sandra's family, I'm actually honored that members of Sandra's family have endorsed my campaign for district attorney. It's one of the most humbling honors of this race for me so far. And I think about it every single day. And I think that is a complete failing of the DA's office that will not happen on my watch.
Yeah, I followed that case closely, and from what I've seen, it was her family that kept pushing for justice and kept saying she would not have she would not have done this. She would not have died by suicide. There has to be something else going on here. And I often think, well, what if her family didn't have the resources or wasn't equipped for whatever reason to do that advocacy? What would have happened in this case?
I think about that all the time, and I've had the privilege of getting to know some of her family members and friends and the people who are out showing such support for her and trying to get justice for her. But I think that case got attention for all of those reasons: the strength and forcefulness of her family and friends. The case involving the death of John O'Keefe and Karen Reed has gotten all kinds of attention. But the reality is most criminal defendants, most victims of crimes, don't get that kind of attention. And it raises the question in my mind, which is the most terrifying question of all, is what else has been going on in this DA's office that we don't even know about, that hasn't gotten that light shed on it. And I think as DA, one of the very first things I'm going to do is review any case where justice has not been obtained for a victim and make sure that we look hard at every single case and prioritize that from day one. Thank you.
So, Adam, what makes you uniquely suited for this role?
Yeah, I believe it or not, I've thought about that question too.
I hope so.
And I think the reality for me is I'm not a typical district attorney candidate. Typical district attorney candidates are former state prosecutors, or we have in this race a former member of Michael Morrissey's leadership team. You have career politicians who frequently run for DA thinking, okay, this will be the capstone job of my career. I am, in this race, the only former federal prosecutor. I'm the only person who has experience and a specialty in prosecuting public corruption cases where I've stood up to institutions like the Massachusetts State Police. I worked for years for the Innocence Project, both in law school and through a partnership when I was at a firm, where I saw some of the hardest cases on the defense side. And there are themes, by the way, in Innocence Project cases that apply to things we've seen right here in Norfolk County. But at the end of the day, those are not the typical attributes of a DA candidate. And I think this is the rare political office where someone with that perspective, coming in with the best practices of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boston, coming in with an outside perspective and a genuine desire to affect the kind of cultural change we need, that's what we need for this job in this moment.
Thank you. Can you tell me more about the Innocence Project and
Sure.
what your work was there?
No, of course. It started in law school and continued for years thereafter, but the Innocence Project is an organization that represents individuals convicted of serious crimes, usually murder or rape, and where they have legitimate claims of innocence. I worked on a case in law school involving someone named Robert Lee Stinson, who was convicted in 1984 of a first-degree intentional homicide in Milwaukee on the basis of bite mark testimony, which, spoiler alert, is a junk science. And I could talk about this case all day. A body of a woman was found in a shared yard between a couple of tenement houses in Milwaukee, and there were 8 bite marks found on her body. A forensic dentist evaluated the bite marks and told detectives, "You're looking for someone who's missing a tooth." Robert Lee Stinson, my client at the time, was missing a tooth. And the detectives conducted a neighborhood canvass and knocked on Lee's door. Lee answered the door. And there's this harrowing line in one of the police reports that said something to the effect of, "As soon as he smiled, we knew we had our man." And so Lee was arrested and charged with first-degree homicide. He was convicted by a jury because a dentist testified at trial that Lee's teeth matched the bite marks found on the victim's body. Match implies a level of certainty that is not supportable by science. But at the time, in 1984, everyone believed the dentist. Fast forward to when we represented him when I was in law school, we proved by DNA evidence and modern bite mark technology, not only was he not the perpetrator, but his teeth were actually an exclusion. His missing tooth didn't even line up with the space in the bite mark on the victim's skin. And so I was there the day he walked out of prison in New Lisbon, Wisconsin. I'll never forget it. And we had asked him where he wanted to eat that day. And he said, I'd love to have shrimp. And this is January in rural Wisconsin. And I grew up here in New England. And shrimp would not have been my first choice. But we went to an Applebee's and I watched Lee navigate a modern restaurant for the first time.
Right.
He was 21 when he went in. I think he was 44 when he got out. More than half of his life, he hadn't chosen what to eat for a meal. And it shapes who I am as a lawyer. It shapes who I am as a prosecutor. And it certainly will shape the kind of district attorney that I am. And I alluded before to some of the parallels between an Innocence Project case and some of the things we've seen here. His case involved investigators taking shortcuts and rushing to judgment and drawing conclusions about his case before collecting all the evidence. And the consequence in that case was the real perpetrator went on to commit other crimes. Yeah. The real perpetrator's DNA ended up matching a guy in prison in Illinois after Lee got out of prison. But those kinds of things, the shortcuts, the drawing conclusions too soon, the investigator tunnel vision, if that sounds familiar, it's because that's what's been happening in Norfolk County for far too long.
Thank you. So my next question was about the two high-profile cases. I know you shared with us a bit about Sandra Birchmore, but if there's anything else you want to share about your perspective on these cases and sort of what you would bring to these kinds of situations.
Yeah, I think I happen to have an incredibly unique insight into this DA's office, which is something that other candidates in this race don't have. It's been publicly reported that I was the lead assistant United States attorney in the federal investigation into the death of John O'Keefe. And while there are aspects of that case that I can't talk about because of federal law and rules and Department of Justice policy, the reality is my work on that case and other public corruption cases in Norfolk County are exactly what led me to decide to run. Mm-hmm. What I saw there, what we've talked about in the Sandra Birchmore case, are things that you would not expect in a county of 750,000 people just outside of Boston in 2026. The idea that because law enforcement might be involved in a crime or might have some role in an investigation, the idea that special treatment might be afforded to certain people or certain groups of people, and I said this before, it's completely unacceptable. It needs to stop, and it's a cultural problem that I believe I'm uniquely situated to solve.
Thank you. So recently, some more details came out about the messages between, I believe it's one of the Canton police officers and a state police investigator. Is there anything you want to say about that?
Sure. The text messages are horrific. If you told me that those text messages were from a transcript of a KKK meeting in 1950, they would still be appalling. I've never seen anything that egregious, and those kinds of messages, those kinds of beliefs, racism and bigotry and misogyny and anti-Semitism have no place in law enforcement in Massachusetts. As a result of those text messages becoming public, within hours, I announced that I was calling on Michael Morrissey, the current district attorney, to resign, effective immediately. Now, a lot of people don't know, but in most counties in Massachusetts, there's a state police detective unit housed at the DA's office that's recruited and supervised by the DA, and they're in charge of, among other things, unattended death investigations, like right here in Norfolk County, like the Sandra Birchmore case, like the death of John O'Keefe. And that state police unit is one where, Michael Proctor, the lead investigator in the Karen Reed case, and the participant in these text message conversations, that's where he worked. He was
in the DA's office.
In the DA's office.
I did not even realize that.
In the SPDU there. And he's picked by, he's supervised by the DA's office. And so anyone, including and especially Michael Morrissey, who supervised Michael Proctor, needs to resign immediately. He's demonstrated an utter failure of leadership and supervision. And while he's decided not to run again, January is not soon enough.
Thank you. I only looked at a few of the texts because they were very difficult to read, and I actually felt sick to my stomach and felt similarly that, I don't know, I guess I live in a bubble to think that these are the kinds of communications that are happening in our community, especially in our law enforcement.
Now, I've seen, as part of my work as a federal prosecutor, I've seen all kinds of text messages, and I've seen horrible text messages. What we saw from this public release of messages is like nothing I've ever seen in any other case.
Okay, well, so given that, what keeps you energized? What keeps you going?
Yeah.
You are in it every day. So what keeps you going?
Yeah, and I've never done this before. I didn't wake up as a 6-year-old and think, gosh, you know what I want to do? I want to be district attorney in Norfolk County. My dream job from the first semester of law school was to be a federal prosecutor. And I think we're extremely lucky to have one of the best U.S. attorney's offices in the country. What I saw made me feel a need to leave to do this. Mm-hmm. But what keeps me energized, honestly, is conversations with voters. I didn't know what I would like and dislike about running. I can tell you I dislike the fundraising aspect. And
bet.
Future Liz and future Adam can have a conversation about how broken money in politics is.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to that. District Attorney Adam and Liz Speaks will have that conversation. But what I actually get a lot of energy from is talking with folks around Norfolk County. People are excited. I think people are their attention is turning as we reach the good weather months now to this race. And unlike most DA's races, which get very little publicity, I think this is going to be a really big race. People care about the DA's office. People are higher information about it. And I view that as exciting. People understand why I'm running and are excited about the message we're getting out there and are buying into my positive vision for the future of the office.
So as we wrap up, is there one kind of lesson or quote or something that a voter has said to you that, or like a theme that you feel like you think of when you're like, I got to make these calls to get this money, you know, and like, cause like, okay, I'm going to do this because, you know, I remember this is what keeps me focused.
I've had a few people come up to me and say things like, you know, thank God you're running. And I certainly appreciate that. Mm-hmm. It makes things a lot heavier and a lot more real, but it's coming from a place where people realize how important this is and they believe in me. And I carry that with me every day. I think that, you know, before I decided to run, a friend of mine told me a story about, she lives in Norfolk County, and she talked about her lack of faith and confidence and talked about her 2 kids walking to the neighborhood park. And if, God forbid, they had been a victim of a crime, she had no confidence that the state police or this DA's office would find who did it and bring that person to justice. And that story, while I was deciding whether to do this, has stuck with me too. That's a little less uplifting than the person who's like, oh, Adam, thank God you're doing this. But it also represents why we need that kind of change and why I believe I'm the right fit for this.
Excellent. So we try to have a call to action on every episode. So what can people do if they are interested in your campaign and they want to support you? What can they do?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is signing up to volunteer. We're going to have an extremely active summer. We're going to be door knocking and phone banking and communicating with voters from now until September when the primary is, until November when the general election is. And so on our website, it's very easy to find, voteadamdeitch.com. You can sign up to volunteer and select the kinds of things that you want to do. I'm not going to give a fundraising pitch right now, but that would be great as well. And then the easiest thing, social media plays such a big role in political campaigns today. So follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and we're on all of the socials. I only had Instagram before this, and I've now learned how important this is, but it's at Adam Deitch on Instagram and Vote Adam Deitch on Facebook. But following and liking and commenting and sharing, we're just trying to get our positive vision out to as many people as possible between now and Election Day. Great.
Thanks so much, Adam, for joining us.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks for joining us. And just a reminder that September 1st is the election day for primaries. So many of our races will be decided on September 1st because they are Democratic, mostly Democratic candidates. So we know that voting before Labor Day and at the end of the summer vacation is very challenging. So just keep September 1st in mind. Early voting will be available, mail-in voting will be available, and we just encourage you to get involved wherever you feel compelled to, and don't forget to vote. Thanks again. We have Jim Barakat with us today, who's running for Norfolk County District Attorney. Welcome, Jim.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you.
Yeah.
So we'll jump right in.
All right.
So tell me, what made you decide to run for District Attorney?
Well, I'm a father, 2 young girls at home, and my wife, and seeing a lot of what was going on in the news, certainly around Karen Reed and the over prosecution and what was going on with the lack of investigation in Sandra Birchmore's case, which it's a fair criticism because I think the Norfolk DA has gotten a lot of flack for both of those things. I was just kind of like, what kind of county am I raising my family in? I didn't agree with the values of the Norfolk County DA's office, so a lot of times people want to do something, and I said maybe this is my opportunity. I could do something, and so I'm a criminal defense attorney, and sometimes I think in the criminal world they could be more humane when dealing with cases and outcomes of cases. So I was like, can I pitch my vision for a more humane Norfolk County, one that I'd be proud to have my kids growing up in.
Yeah, great, thank you. So what do you think is working well and what needs improvement currently in the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office?
I'd say probably almost every candidate would say they need to be more transparent. I think a lot of things are happening behind the scenes that we're not really aware of. Most recently, I think these Michael Proctor text messages has come out. These terrible messages, and it seems that like the Norfolk County DA's office have been sitting on them for quite a while. I know there's been challenges in court to should his phone messages or his phone even be part of a criminal investigation or civil investigation, and now that it's kind of like this is kind of almost like yet another thing that's hit the media, and people are kind of rebuffing again and saying like, there's more? Like I thought maybe we've seen everything, but clearly there's still more out there. So certainly one that's more transparent, but one that utilizes the immense power that the district attorney's office has to practice its prosecutorial discretion. They do it. I think every district attorney's office does it. I think but the real question is, are they doing it for the right reasons? It almost would seem, from like a citizen standpoint like myself, that the Norfolk County DA's office does use, prosecutorial discretion, but only for those who are connected or those who are in law enforcement. It should really go to help the common person, the person who, is being prosecuted for stealing $20 of chicken tenders from Market Basket, not because they want to steal from Market Basket, but because they can't afford to eat, and now here they are in a terrible, a terrible and just a terrible situation.
Yeah. So you mentioned prosecutorial discretion. I don't know that everybody knows what that means. And also you mentioned the immense power that the district attorney's office has. So can you tell us from your perspective, what is the role of the district attorney?
So certainly to deliver justice. I think that's almost the textbook answer, that the district attorney is there to deliver justice. I would take it a step further. I think the district attorney should play an active role in lowering the crime rate. It's a little counterintuitive because you're almost like, if you're lowering the crime rate, where's all your cases going to come from? And it's not really, I don't really like to look at it in that lens because it's a community role in many ways. I have a friend, and I said it's hard to make the district attorney's race interesting the way maybe a mayor or a councilman might make a race. And my friend said to me, they said, no, you can make it interesting. It's about community. It's about people coming together. And I said, that's 100% right. And, I talk about on the, I'll call it the campaign trail, I talk about lowering the crime rate a lot. Yeah. And, ostensibly the district attorney should want to lower the crime rate, but what are they really doing to push that forward? And I say it again and again that entering the prison system and getting that first conviction on your record, is always the biggest contributor to recidivism down the road. And so if we can prevent folks from getting that first entry on their CORI, which is a criminal background rap sheet, we call it, it would go a long way to stopping further crime, because what often happens is people graduate from crimes, lower crimes, into bigger ones. They get arrested, charged, and after a while maybe they get found guilty for a simple shoplifting, and sometimes people do jail time for that, and they come out and they already have a record, so hard for them to find a job, hard for them to find housing, and they become desperate and they just kind of graduate to the next crime, whether it's larceny or armed robbery or something like that, because instead of trying to fix the problem in the beginning, we've kind of put out there that these folks should be punished, and sometimes in the prison system re-traumatized, and we sit back and we call it justice. And what I've been saying is we can't just keep trying to incarcerate our way out of a lot of social problems that we have.
Absolutely, I agree. So what do you think the DA can do in order to minimize that sort of first initial entry into the criminal legal system that then creates a pathway towards often more crime? What could the DA do to make that different?
Well, I think it would kind of take a bigger cooperation and agreements with all these other any agencies, because when someone goes in to prison in Massachusetts, it roughly costs the taxpayers about $85,000 per year per inmate, and a lot of the reasons folks are in the system to begin with is kind of like I mentioned, lack of housing, lack of mental health treatment, lack of substance use treatment, and lack of jobs. And so, what would $85,000 per inmate do to help these community programs that are otherwise failing to meet, the basic needs of the community because they don't have the money? Corrections officers are very overworked. It's almost like you can call it like bad schools when they have too many students to teacher ratio. A lot of them are responsible for more inmates than they could reasonably take care of, and in that makes services in prisons worse, and less opportunities for like rehabilitation services and reentry services, because you have so many people looking to get so many things. It's almost like you got 20 slots in the school and you got 100 people looking for it. So that would go a long way, kind of reversing the funds. Where can they go? Diversion programs. There's a statute in Massachusetts that decriminalizes certain low-level offenses. And when I talk about this, I talk about it in two ways. One is, your more serious / violent crimes. I think that's in a whole other category than low-level nonviolent offenders. And we're talking a lot of drugs, non-distribution drugs, and petty theft and things like that. So there's restorative justice initiatives we can take, and just making, kind of like my friend said, making the DA's office a more community service than it already is.
And you mentioned some of the factors that lead people to commit some of these low-level crimes. And in my work and my background, one of the things that I'm familiar with is that I've seen different studies, but around 95% of women in prison have a pretty significant trauma history. and which goes along with mental health challenges, of course. And so we know that prison is not trauma sensitive. And so just to kind of lift up the fact that women are often in prisons because of something that's connected to their trauma. And if we are investing in trauma support services, maybe we wouldn't be filling our prisons with women.
I mean, I couldn't agree more with that. And I would say I'm surprised that the number's not 100% and it's that it's 95 because, and it even goes for maybe women who've committed or allegedly committed a violent crime. You don't go out and commit violence. Very probably in almost 100% of the cases you've had violence inflicted upon you. So it's kind of like re-traumatization going back in the prisons. Not to mention, I mean, I'm a father, totally team dad, but I know the major role that mothers and women play in our society. So when you lock up a mother, that's more dinners that they're not having at home with their kids, and it's kind of a punishment for the children as well. I used to do a lot of work defending children and families when DCF would enter their lives, and the homage we changed it from like a school to prison pipeline to a birth to prison pipeline, because when you don't have your mother or your father around, it's so much more likely that the children will end up, maybe not incarcerated, but will end up with a conviction on their record by the time they turn 18.
Right, yeah. And instead of investing in those supportive services around newborns and toddlers, where attachment is the most important, factor in their lives, we're investing $85,000 a year in one person being in prison.
Right.
Yep. So what makes you uniquely suited for this role?
So I've never been a prosecutor before. I think some people think that's a non-starter and I shouldn't even be in the race. I disagree. I know a lot of prosecutors who've became defense attorneys and they're amazing at their job. And, I just think why do we believe that we have almost like a radioactive DA's office with prosecutor number one in there? Why is it that we should replace a prosecutor with another one? From a defense standpoint, I kind of know where cases fall short, why some are weak in court, where they don't have enough, whether it's constitutional backing or bad argument or just bad evidence, unconstitutional searches and things like that. So knowing the strengths and the weaknesses from behind the scenes of defending cases, I feel like I can bring that skill into the district attorney's office.
Thank you. So you referenced in the beginning 2 of the high-profile cases that have been in the news. Can you tell me about your perspective on those cases?
Well, they're terrible. I mean, I think these are the cases that really ran Michael Morrissey out of office in many ways. I know he's still the DA, but he's not running for re-election, and I could only imagine it's because of the fallout from these cases. I think certainly a lot of missteps were taken, and that's an understatement. I think it was clear from the get-go, at least in Karen Reed, as it started gaining popularity with Turtle Boy and all these other online journalists, and then mainstream media, that something's not right here. And I hate to say it, but a lot of these things that we see in these parallels, these things that get us upset from the Karen Reed trial, whether it's from a lack of investigation or a conflict of interest or something that is a constitutional question, or overcharging. This happens every day in Massachusetts to a lot of my clients who are black and brown, but because it doesn't get the mainstream media attention that the Karen Reed case has gotten, you never hear about it. I have colleagues who have gotten murder acquittals and not one news truck was outside. and it's sad in two ways. It's sad for the defendant, and it's sad for the victims of the family. The family of the victims, because where's their recognition? Where's their kind of closure in many ways? And Sandra Birchmore, just really what a fumble on the part of the Norfolk County DA's office, and it's my understanding that they still have her official cause of death as suicide. And I was just on a show yesterday, and I said there's still time for them to reverse course and make things right. Just address where you were wrong. Whether people accept that apology or not, I don't know. But it's very, very remarkable to have the federal government step in and take over an investigation.
Yeah, and that particular situation has really impacted me in my heart. And the thing that I am thinking about is, like you said, with Karen Reed, but also with Sandra Birchmore's family, they fought. They kept fighting and saying, no, this is not what happened. She would not have done this. And so without her family really pushing and advocating, it would have just gone as a suicide, right. And there would be no consequences for.
And I wouldn't be surprised if that happened and Matthew Farwell was still on the Stoughton Police Force. I'm not anti-police. I'm anti-bad police.
Sure, I think we all are.
I think someone like Matthew Farwell is bad police, and that's keeping it light when we talk about him. Apparently his trial is still coming up, but the more and more that gets released, that certainly the Norfolk DA's office knew about. You lose trust in the system, and when you lose trust in the system, it's not good for anybody, because if you got a person having some sort of episode in front of your home, do you want to call the police? I don't know. You'd hope you would, but. Yeah. If you've lost trust in the system, you might not.
Right, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of people with different racial and ethnic identities that have felt that way for a long time.
Yes.
And I think more in the past few years, a lot more, wider, range of people have started to feel that way about the system. And I'm curious, how would you go about trying to rebuild trust, or if there never was trust in the system for some folks, how do you build trust that the district attorney's office is a place that is transparent and equitable across the community?
So, you got to be available for public inquiry. You can't not hold a press conference for a year plus because you're scared of the questions that someone might ask you. Secondly, I think, making a list of officers who you just don't call in a trial, which is different from a Brady list, which is a list of officers that may have had some sort of misconduct in their past, probably not directly related to the case at point, but in the abundance of caution, you may as well kind of just give that information over to the defense attorney's side, and so if it's relevant, they can use it. If it's not, they don't use it. I get Brady material all the time. I use it when it's necessary. Sometimes it's thank you for giving it to me. I have no use for this. But separate from you cannot call this person list. District attorneys separate from police force. They have no way to really discipline an officer for doing something within the police force that they would deem that it would destroy a case. People get mad when people get off on technicalities, and by calling an officer who you're on a do not call list, or should be on one of these do not call lists, could and would be one of those technicalities. You can show that our only course of action is I'm going to let the police department deal with officer so and so. But as far as our purposes, we don't find any of that evidence credible.
Okay, thank you. So you've been campaigning for a while, you have kids, you're working, it's a lot. So how do you stay energized and keep going?
I'll be honest, NOS energy drinks all the time.
Okay, fair enough.
I think when I was out doing what I found so far in the campaign to be a very taxing part was grabbing the signatures from my constituents, and I think at one point in the back of the car, it was like a junkyard of energy drinks. No, it is difficult, and I'm human, so at times it's more difficult than others. Some days, I wake up and I'm like, I'm really happy to hit the pavement and talk about these issues, and not most of the days, but some other days I'm just like, it's a lot. It is a lot. So it's hard. Any way people can stress relief, walk the dog, tune it all out. It's hard to keep up with the current events too, because not just nationally or internationally, even local, a lot happens. It's moving at a rapid pace, and you blink your eye, you missed something huge.
Yeah, especially in Quincy.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So one of the things that we're focused on in this podcast is civic engagement. And so it's each episode, each interview, we try to have some kind of opportunity for a call to action. And so if people are listening to you and they're saying, oh, I'm really inspired by what your vision is and I want to help out, how would you suggest people get involved?
Oh, with like my campaign specifically?
Whatever civic engagement, yeah. I mean, this is...
I'll say this. At this point in the race, with the exception of the independent and Pagliano, who's running, I've met all of the candidates many times over. I have nothing but high praise for all of them. I know a lot of my ideas are super progressive. It might not be for everyone. My counter to that is a lot of the things I'm saying are from studies by people who are much brighter than I am and can put it a much more eloquent way than I can. And it's real science and it's real statistics, and it is true. All I'm saying, Massachusetts incarcerates more people than the whole continent of Europe, but that's because Europe doesn't use incarceration the way we do. And they've followed these studies. They know ways to lower the incarceration rate and in turn lower the crime rate. But I understand that's not for everybody. I would say go out and help out with another campaign. If these are issues that are important to you, Macy Lee is great. Craig McClellan is great. I've met them all. They're all great. So just get involved and do what you can and be passionate about it. Even if it's just calling your neighbor and telling them, I'm voting for Jim, and this is why, and I think maybe you should vote for him too.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
And for me, just a little bit about what I've done recently. I created a new department in the city of Cambridge, a community safety department that is an alternative to police. So civilians are sent out on 911 calls instead of police on certain areas, with the whole similar premise that you're talking about. If we can reduce police interventions with these kind of low-level or mental health kinds of issues, and provide a holistic support for folks. Often it's poverty, substance abuse, mental health that's driving these things. And so if we can address the issue with the people who have the expertise in that, we can save money on trips to the hospital, police interventions, incarceration, but also save our society in a way that we haven't kind of got the hang of yet. So
you're speaking my language.
when you say you're too progressive, I'm like, same. I'm with you on that. So really appreciate getting to chat with you and getting to know you.
I had a great time.
Yeah,
coming in.
Great. And so thank you all, and we'll tune in next time.